The Schechter Institute in Jerusalem is offering a series of Jewish studies courses for the general public starting March 1st. This is the fourth year of Schechter's adult education program for English speakers. One of the courses will explore the topic of 20th century American Jewish short stories, assimilation, alienation, and reclamation, taught by Dr. Shana Rosenblatt Maurer, an instructor at Herzog College and the Schechter Institute. She spoke to us about the course.
Several years ago, Schechter opened an English language track, and I was part of that initiative. So I've been teaching courses in topics in contemporary Jewish literature for several years at Schechter.
And tell us a little bit about the course that you'll be teaching in this upcoming series.
So this spring semester, I'll be teaching a course entitled The American Jewish Short Story. And really what it is a sampling of some of the most iconic and significant short stories that have come out of American Jewish writing in the 20th century, looking at some of the best-known writers, but also writers who have been somewhat forgotten and deserve their place in the American Jewish canon.
Which writers will be featured?
So I'm starting off with the writer Abraham Kahn, and Abraham Kahn was best known as the editor of the Yiddish Forwards. He was editor for almost 50 years, and it was really the most important newspaper for the Yiddish speakers of New York during the first half of the 20th century. And it was a way to access America, to understand their world, to discuss all of the percolating issues that were troubling the Jewish community of that time. But concurrent with that, Abraham Kahn also was a fiction writer, and we'll be reading the story The Ghetto Wedding, which is from his second published work, an anthology of short stories. And it touches on some of his critical themes, such as disappointment with the dream of the America paved with gold streets, a general disappointment with the promised materialism of Jewish mobility in the United States, and as well as the plight of Jewish workers, because of course Jewish workers were an important part of the labor movement in New York in the first half of the 20th century, and he deals with that extensively as well.
Now, the curriculum also spans to more contemporary writers as well.
True. By the end of the course, we'll be looking at Allegra Goodman and Nathan Englander, two writers who are very current, important writers who continue to write into the 21st century. And we'll be finishing the course, in fact, with Nathan Englander's short story, What We Talk About When We Talk About Anne Frank, the title story of his 2012 collection. And it's interesting because it's almost a full circling back. In the middle of the course, we see how the stories sort of become out of touch with a more ritualistic, observant Jewish life. And by the end of the course, we see how there's a re-engagement with that and a sort of rediscovery or a re-exploration of a more ritualistically observant, traditional Jewish way of thinking and living.
A subtitle or a subhead of the course is Assimilation, Alienation, and Reclamation. So you would say that reflects that circle, as you mentioned?
It does. I mean, those have had oversimplification, because in each different era, all of those factors were at play. But the reclamation is very much what I just mentioned in terms of Nathan Englander. The alienation is more the middle generation of the 20th century, what we might call the Great Triumvirate of Saul Bellow, Bernard Malamud, and Philip Roth, amongst others, when there was a tendency to feel a sort of pull towards a more assimilationist, integrated perspective, but yet not a total disengagement with one's Jewish roots. And that left these writers almost dually marginalized from both sectors, not entirely American, but nor are they firmly ensconced in a Jewish milieu.
Ultimately, all of these writers are connected in terms of the probing of the question identity against the backdrop of being in American or being the Jewish identity and the broader identity in society.
Well, that's a good question, actually, because there's one story in Dreams Begin Responsibility by Delmore Schwartz, which really doesn't have any Jewish content. And many, many critics have debated the question, what constitutes Jewish American writing, or what constitutes Jewish writing at all? And one might argue that this story doesn't belong in this course because it doesn't really have any sort of Jewish foundation. However, Delmore Schwartz was clearly a Jewish writer in terms of a lot of the themes and a lot of the anxieties and worries that he explores in his writing. And he is considered a very important part of the Jewish American, I'll say, sort of flowering of literature in the middle of the 20th century. So while most of the stories do straddle that dual identity of American Jewish, we have a story where we'll have to discuss in the course, does it really belong within the canon of American Jewish writing, or should we see it simply as a work that happens to be written by a Jewish author?
Well, that's a wonderful question to explore.
I'm not sure we'll find a definitive answer, but we'll definitely give it our best shot.
Dr. Shana Rosenblatt-Maurer.